Hello, my name is Michele, and you're listening to Profit is a Choice.
Julia Hash of JSH Designs in Raleigh, North Carolina joins us today on the podcast. Julia owns a full-service boutique drapery fabrication and design studio. She shares with us how her dream started in her attic, moved down to the main living space, and then outside of her home. Listen into the journey of entrepreneurship that Julia has taken and continues to take to grow the business in a way that accentuates what she and her team do best.
Every day, empowered entrepreneurs are taking ownership of their company financial health and enjoying the rewards of reduced stress and more creativity. With my background as a financial software developer, owner of multiple businesses in the interior design industry, educator, and speaker, I coach women in the interior design industry to increase their profits, regain ownership of their bottom line, and to have fun again in their business. Welcome to Profit is a Choice.
Hey, Julia, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Michele, how are you?
I'm great. How are you today?
Hanging in there, doing well.
Good. Well, I am so excited to have you on and to chat with you today about your Drapery Workroom and the business and how you started and where you are and all the good stuff. So why don't we jump in, and I would love to hear you share with me and our listeners how you started your business. When did you start it and how did you start it?
Okay, well, I'd love to share that. First off, thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this. I started my workroom. I've been sewing since I can remember. I think I was in fourth grade, 4-H, I think is when I first started sewing, and always had an interest in it. And I did apparel, made my prom dresses, things like that. But when my husband and I first bought our first house, I had a neighbor that asked me, I did some window treatments for my own home. I was like, I can do that. I sew, I can make that. And so I did some for myself. And then I had friends ask me to do some things for them and thoroughly enjoyed it and started just doing it on the side, part-time. I was working full-time as an office manager in an insurance company for about 12 years or so. And then when my children were born, we had to make some changes, and my daughter has a very rare health condition, lung condition. And so we had to kind of pivot and change what we decided to do as far as staying home. And I needed something with flexibility. I was fortunate enough to have a neighbor who knew a designer that worked at a local furniture company. And I kind of got in with her, have continued. It was a really good relationship, and we were able to help each other, and it grew from there. I did start when the kids were very little, the attic of our home, which is not heated or cooled. So I had very limited time during the day. During the summer months, I had early mornings, late evenings. Winter, I would do later in the afternoons, or work when they were in preschool. I remember putting my son, who is now 19, in the bouncy seat with me, beside me, early morning because it wasn't too hot, and he slept and I sewed. Then a few years after that, we decided, since it was going to be a full-time venture, that we had to make a better working situation for myself. So we moved the workroom downstairs into my sunroom, and was here for about 12 years. I was here about 12 years. And at that point, have moved out about 6 years ago into a separate studio space.
Now, when you were introduced to the designer and you saw that you could help each other, I know you'd been sewing since, you said, fourth grade and 4-H. Did you know how to do custom window treatments though? Or how did you find your way? Because I had been sewing for a few years, and I know it took me a while to figure out, like, what does it mean to have what are the professional standards for what we're creating?
Correct. I didn't know all of those things. It was all a on the job training kind of situation. I think about some of the things that, even though they looked good to the person who may not know any different, I look back on some of it and go, oh Lord, I can't believe I actually gave that to somebody. But that was in the very, very early years. They wouldn't have known the difference. as far as I've scoured patterns, at the time, I think Simplicity had some basic patterns, because had some basic window treatment patterns.
Mm-hmm.
I used those to start with. And then I was fortunate enough to find Cheryl Strickland and the Academy, and was able to go to several of the conferences back in the day, and met some wonderful, wonderful people. And the amount of knowledge I gained in those first few years, just with conferences and the online forum, was invaluable.
Yeah, I remember finding the Custom Home Furnishings Academy with Cheryl back in, I want to say 2003. It was in one of those moments where I was like, something's got to give, or I can't keep doing this. Like I had gathered what I could gather, and I felt like I needed more. I needed community. I needed to talk to somebody. I needed to work through some things. And I remember finding it one night, like around midnight. And it makes me giggle now, but it was one of those, you had to be a professional to join. Well, I didn't know what it meant to be professional, but I knew I wanted to be professional. I was trying to be professional, and certainly couldn't that be enough. And so I submitted to join the night before. That was when the forum was free. And then you paid for all the extra stuff, but you had to be accepted.
Correct.
I had no idea that Peggy was sitting in the office and was going to accept me the next morning. And I remember all night long thinking, are they going to accept me as professional or not? Am I or not? I've got my business license. I've got all these things, but am I professional enough? Like, what does that mean?
Right.
And now I just look back on me and smile, but I wanted so badly to get it right. I wanted to do it right.
Yes.
Not just the business end of it, but I wanted to learn. And back in those days, it wasn't simple panels. It was, layers and layers of Kingstons and, pull up swags. And it was as complicated as ever from a window treatment perspective. It wasn't like today. I mean, if you can do Romans and panels, you can just about do 90% of all windows. I mean,
isn't that the truth? Yes, it really has changed. We've
really gotten down to, like, we sell, specialized rectangles. I'm not diminishing the work in those. There's a lot, but the shape is not that different.
Correct.
And what we did back then was a lot more swoops and swags and layers and 4 fabrics together with 14 trims and micro cording everywhere.
Right.
It's just a lot more detail. I remember thinking, now I got to go make all my own trim. Now I got to go apply all my own trim. It was just so much.
Right. So many pieces and parts. It was tons of ways to adjust a pattern, or just layers upon layers upon layers of detail.
Yes, very much so. And so I remember that I need to find somebody and find something. And that's when I really started realizing here are the professional standards. And I'm like you, I look back at some of the work from my very first year. Some of it, if you're far enough away, it looks awesome. Some of it, I don't care how far away you get, it does not look awesome.
No, I think about the same thing. And I think about one time, like one of my very first ones, somebody was paying me to do something, and I put it on the board. I was so excited about it. And then I go back to do something for them a few years later. And I was like, oh my Lord, I didn't cover the top of the dustboard. I mean, those were the things that, you just didn't know. You didn't know. I mean, you knew what it looked good on face value, but it's all the little details that, looking back on it, I'm a little horrified about that, but that's okay.
That's okay. So you've moved out into a studio space outside of your home.
Yes.
Did you start hiring pretty quickly through this process? Did you hire when you were still in your home working in the sunroom, or was your first hire after you moved out of the house?
I had my first hire I was still at home in my sunroom. And I had a wonderful person, a dear friend, who had worked for a large bedding manufacturer as their sample room manager. And she came in, she was looking for something part-time. The company had closed, and she came in and started working with me here, and was just wonderful, great asset, and still a good friend. And then when she went back to grad school, have had another friend, another mom that I met through school. You know, a lot of our connections were that when our kids were younger. And she started working with me first time she came. I said, I just need you to come and hold something for me. I'll pay you. I just need for you to come and help me with something. And she's still with me. So
That's amazing.
Yeah, she's amazing. So.
Now, Julia, when you started all of this, I ask this sometimes, and I'm curious to your answer. Did you start with a business plan, or did you start with just, let me meet you, let's start sewing together, let's see what happens?
Oh, no, I did not have a business plan. I would love to say I did, and I was that on top of it, but no, I didn't. It was a little bit by little bit have I learned what I needed to do.
Sure. I didn't start with one either the first time. I definitely had a business plan when I started my coaching / consulting firm.
Sure.
And I had one when I started my podcast, and then we had one at CHF. But when I first started all the way back in 2000, no, it was, can you do this for me? Yes, I'll pay you this. Okay. And that was the extent of what I was doing.
At the time, I guess I really wasn't thinking of myself as a business. I was earning some extra money.
Okay.
Yeah. Really, to be honest, I was just earning some extra money to help with the household at that time.
Yep.
When I was doing it kind of part-time. Then when I started doing it more full-time, and that was what we were going to do, I did have more plans in place, but I never really had a formal business plan.
Okay. When did you start really kind of looking at and digging into the profitability and the planning and the intention behind your business?
I would say probably with real intention was when I moved out of my home office, when I moved out of the space, when I knew that
rent,
when I knew I had overhead I had to pay, I knew I had utilities that I wasn't paying, you know, that were just, we were taking care of, you know, out of our house, out of our household budget. That I would really say that was when I became much more focused and intentional with how I was running the business.
I was going to ask you what prompted it. And so it was probably, like you said, the moving out, and that does shift things up, because you also needed help. I mean, I know you had some help, you know, when you were in the home, but there's something different to leave your house to go out to install, but to leave a building of a place of business. Yes. And it was a very scary move. It was, that was a huge step. I remember, at the night we were packing up to move everything the next day, I remember standing at my table. It hadn't been totally taken down yet. And we were in tears. I was like, what am I doing? I mean, I was super excited about it. And I was so happy to be able to have more space and to feel like I was be able to do more room and get stuff out of my house. And because they'd pretty much taken over the whole house, but I was terrified. I was like, what have I done? And I was just in tears. And I mean, looking back on it, it was just stressful. And I knew it was the right thing. I was just scared to do it. How long do you think you planned before you took that leap? And what kind of planning did you do?
Well, honestly, probably for the year before, I kind of had it in the back of my mind as, do I want to do this? Is it the right step? I started talking to friends who had in the area that I'm friends with that are in the same business, and, you know, asking the ones that had separate spaces. When did you start thinking about doing this? How has it affected you? Does it, you know, are you scared? You know, you have more expenses. And they were just like, yes, I was terrified, but it was the right thing to do. And you will be glad you did it. And I have definitely been glad to do it. I've done it. And I will say that a year before, when I was looking for a space, I really wasn't positive what I needed. And rent, how much was I going to pay and all of that. I had actually saved up enough to, I knew that if for some reason something happened and there was no business or something, I had enough in my savings that would take care of the rent and the utilities for the year. I had enough to do that. After that, no, I didn't, but I knew I had enough that I had that safety net. And the landlord I was working with, because at the time there wasn't a lot of inventory either. So he was like, don't worry about it. He said, we'll do a 3-year lease, but if in a year you don't want, he said, I can always rent this space. So I knew him, kind of was like, okay, I have a year, I have enough money to pay for it if something happens. And that's really probably the most forward thinking I had done up to that point. But.
Well, and I'm always a proponent of profit first, which
yes.
I know that you do.
Yes, I do. Mm-hmm.
Profit first, because we've worked together and coached together over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also that huge proponent of making sure that you have a few months in advance of whatever it is you're doing. So if you're going to have rent, let's go ahead and get 3 to 6 months worth of rent. If you're going to hire somebody, let's get 3 months of their salary saved, so that by the time you do it, you have that extra money to keep it going. Right. Mm-hmm. And so that is rather amazing that you had already saved a year's worth of your rent in case you needed it to keep the company going. That's really awesome. That's fantastic. It probably had to give you a little bit of breathing room as you did it, because there are also extra expenses that come up in a move, just like when we move our home or move anything.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter what the business is. Moving from home outside of your home into some type of a studio or workspace, there are always those things that pop up.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
What do you think, moving out of your home and into a studio workspace, what do you think some of the first benefits were that you saw? What were the first big things that you're like, okay, this is good?
Well, personally, I mean, is the fact that I had my home back. I didn't have completed treatments all in the dining room. I didn't have, I felt there was a breathing space in my home. I didn't feel so cluttered. And I mean, I still feel like I work all the time, but when I come home, if I'm working, I do paperwork in my office, that type of thing. But the rest of it just was kind of freeing. So that was definitely a bonus, a plus. Second was I felt more like, I won't say, and I'm not going to say professional, because that's not what I mean.
Legitimate.
Yes, thank you. I felt more like, okay, it wasn't like, oh, I've made it. That's not it. But I just felt more legitimate. I felt like I would be able to take on additional clients that I may not have appealed to before, if that makes sense. Not appealed to, but I mean, my presence was more known having a separate location.
Mm-hmm. And did your business model stay the same, or did you realize that the business model needed to change? My
business model has stayed the same pretty much for the last, when moving out, I was still wholesale and retail. And until the last year or so, I have done both. But I am moving away from the retail aspect of it. I still do some retail for long-term clients and that type of thing, but I really have moved away from the retail aspect of it. I don't really enjoy that aspect. I really enjoy working with the designers and helping them. I'd say that's more our sweet spot than the retail aspect.
And have the jobs that you've been working on been able to be bigger since I mean, I know I still have a workroom at my
Mhm.
home, and
Right.
there are certain limitations to how wide, you know,
Yes.
well, these
Mhm.
days the only sewing I'm doing is for myself and maybe my
Mhm.
mom.
Mhm.
I don't do a lot anymore, but even back in the day, there was a certain length that felt comfortable and a certain width that felt comfortable.
Mhm.
Whereas if I had had a much larger studio space, like when we were working at the academy, I could bring two tables. It didn't even
Yes.
phase me for how long or how wide something was,
Oh,
other
absolutely.
than the fact that I needed help moving it around. But I knew that we had the table space. I knew that we could find a way to accommodate. And it is,
Yes.
the smaller the workroom, the more difficult it is to accommodate with ease some of
Yes.
these larger projects. Did you feel like you had the opportunity to take on maybe a different depth or breadth of work than you
Yes.
did when you were in your home?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I felt like I had the equipment and the space to do the larger projects. To Yes, absolutely. I definitely feel that way.
Um, and then what about hiring? Did you start looking to hire more? Was there, because I can imagine that if I were to move out into a space like that and I could take on more projects and I was found by more designers and more was coming, at some point you also need more help.
Correct. Correct.
What's that
To
journey been like?
that is not it's not a fun journey very often. It can be. You can have some wonderful people, and I'm very fortunate. Deborah, that's been with me for a long time, and then my other employee, April, has been with me going almost 3 years now.
3 years, right?
Almost four, maybe four.
Wow.
And she's amazing. You just don't find staff like that very often. She came to me from another workroom that had retired. And at that point, they were looking also for another workroom to take on some of their model home jobs. So at the time, if that had not been in the mix, I may have waited a little bit longer to have hired a full-time person, but I knew the level of work and the amount of work that was going to be coming in. We couldn't handle that, just the two of us. And for me not to have to sew all the time either, because as you know, there's always all the other things that go along with it, and there's just never enough time to do the sewing and all the admin stuff.
Right. And you needed to be the one running the business and meeting the
Yes.
designers and going to the homes and
Yes.
doing all the other pieces and parts. Yes.
Yes. Yes. And that has been kind of my goal with it, is to handle that aspect of the business and to get out of sewing on a daily basis. Right now, I'm having to sew on a daily basis because I've lost one of my employees. But my goal is not to be in that situation.
Sure.
Is to hire for that. So,
Okay.
but yes, but hiring is definitely not an easy thing, and finding the right fit is always hard.
Especially when in a drapery workroom, upholstery workroom, we're trying to hire a skilled labor. And
Yes.
um, that that is absolutely a challenge, because as much as we all enjoy the benefits of having things sewn, it's not something that is taught in our schools. It's not
Mm-mm.
something that is looked upon or even offered at the same level that it was even when we were growing up.
True.
I mean, my grandmother sewed, my mother sewed, my
Mm-hmm.
aunt sewed, everybody in my family sewed. My sister and I were probably that first generation that came up that didn't necessarily act like I didn't learn how to sew in school. I learned how to sew. My mom sewed, and I would ask her, and I watched her and her mom. So my mother and my grandmother, they sewed all the time, and I would watch, but they never really sat down and taught me how to sew on their sewing machine by and large,
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't want to learn.
Right.
Right. At the
Right.
time,
Mm-hmm.
I lived in a mill town. And so at the time, I saw that as a way of perhaps entrapment to
Right.
having to
Right. I can see
mill.
that. Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to
Mm-hmm.
do it. And so then later, through a nesting phase and pregnancy with my firstborn, I was like, oh, I think I want to learn how to sew. And so I, got a sewing machine while I was, 7 months pregnant. My husband bought me one for my birthday, and I started sewing and, small things and never looked back. But I would say kind of my age group, that generation, is that one of the first generations that unless you were intentional about sewing, it was starting to move out a little bit of the school systems. We were learning, typing, and everything was about going to college. And it was just, the conversation was just different around what you could do or be. And I'm sure that it was there, but I don't remember it being offered. I never remember hearing about go take a sewing class, because most people learn to sew at the knee of their mother or their grandmother.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
So
that's true.
With that and seeing this overall shift, what I think has been kind of fun is here we are not teaching it by and large as a society in the US anymore. Yet you watch Etsy and you watch all these things popping up. People are just craving the craftiness of making and doing things. And so
absolutely.
It is something that I think we need. I mean, my goodness, watch what just happened in COVID, the mask making, people that pulled out sewing machines that had been collecting dust in their attic so that they could just a few short months ago, create these masks that allowed them healthily to be able to leave their home or go do something. So there's a need, but finding that really skilled labor that can come in and listen, this is going to sound really crazy, but I'm talking about people that can sew a straight line.
Yeah.
Right. And what I mean by that, because there are some people that I have seen try to come in to apply for a job and they couldn't even sew a straight line, let alone, anything else. But there is so much math, so much decision-making that goes into the stitching and the sewing of what we do. I think in some ways it's a highly skilled labor. It's not.
I agree completely. I agree.
It's not just, I can pull out my Kenmore and put a couple of stitches in something. The minute you sit down on these industrial machines, they can get away. You can look, we've got friends who've sewn through fingers. So these things can, and stapled through fingers and everything else.
Yes, I have.
Yeah. They can get away from you really, really fast. So there is and so to be able to do it with confidence and precision, it takes the right person. And our employee pool, if you will, potential employee pool is getting smaller and smaller and smaller.
It is. And we were actually having this discussion with my other employees the other day, because, we actually are in the process of trying to hire again. I had hired somebody and it just didn't work out. It wasn't the right fit. And that happens. But we were discussing what skills we needed. And we were talking about the fact that there's a lot of engineering that's involved in this. It's not just putting pieces of fabric together. It's not all assembly line work, especially in a workroom. You have to have someone who can really understand how everything goes together and what the next step is. That if you don't do this step first, the third step down the road is not going to be right. And there's just a lot of math. There's a lot of
it's an engineering role.
It is. It's definitely an engineering role. It's not even just sitting down and sewing at the machine. You have to think about the next step, and you have to have an employee or a hire that is willing to learn those steps and have the ability to do them. And in today's age right now, it's finding somebody who has with those skills, that has the work ethic, that wants to come in and get the job done.
Oh gosh, isn't that so hard?
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, I'm very fortunate with the staff I have right now, but it's just hard because it is not. And I won't say, maybe it's not glamorous, I don't know, but I find a lot of personal satisfaction in what we do. So
Yeah, making beautiful things. You're absolutely right. I know the upholstery industry has the same issue.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
even years ago, I sat in on um, I was going to say a conference call, but it was an in-person conference. It was a workshop that we had, and we had members from the trades all over the interior design industry. We had people from the building aspect. So we had like a representative from tile, from the masonry side. We had a representative from, electricians and plumbing and steel and concrete, just all over the place. And everybody kept talking about a shortage of labor, a shortage of labor. It's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And so it was interesting to me to see some of the challenges that we were facing in hiring for drapery workrooms or upholstery workrooms, that very skilled labor that like you said, they didn't just show up. We're not talking assembly line. You had to be able to have some strategic thinking within the job. You had to be able to engineer things, think outside the box, but also take lessons learned from somewhere else and apply it. And I remember them talking about doing some really intricate, detailed stonework. And they were talking about that just like an apprenticeship could be 3 to 5 years to be able to understand what to do, when to do, what corners to cut, when not to cut, how to adjust. And all of us talking about, you don't just walk in and have those skills. It takes a while to grow them. And so finding somebody who's willing to pour in the time almost to apprentice and to learn it, to really be a master at it. I know Cynthia Blaskacek talks about a lot on the upholstery side. It's years to be a master upholsterer. And,
absolutely.
And just like in design, meaning full on, home design, room design, window treatment design, furniture design, no two things are ever exactly the same. So you are constantly adjusting and taking lessons learned from one area and trying to apply them to the next area, and finding people that want to think that way and earn that way, when sometimes you have to be okay with getting it wrong sometimes, because that's part of the learning.
Yep.
And it's also one of those things that if you're not getting the same cookie cutter request day in and day out, you may do something. It could be 6 to 8 months before it ever rolls back through the workroom to do again. So it is a little bit more difficult to learn in those cases.
Right.
When you're not doing, it's not like we're doing a knife edge pillow. Please make 58 knife edge pillows.
Right.
We're going to, do a Kingston, and then in a year, another Kingston's going to come through, and you've almost got to rethink it, relearn it. It just doesn't become rote at that point.
Right. Absolutely. And I find that, having somebody that's willing to also be a problem solver.
Yes.
Have somebody say, well, let's figure out how we can make this work. Not, oh gosh, it's not going to work, we can't do it.
Right. Or sorry, that's too hard. Don't want to think about that.
Yeah, exactly. But.
So as your business has shifted from being in a cold, hot attic to moving to a sunroom, to being in a space outside of your home, when and how have you seen your profitability journey shift and change through all that? And what would you say have been some of the 2 to 3 things that you've done that have really impacted your profitability?
I would say my profitability journey definitely has had its ups and downs. There, I'm getting much, much better at really laying the groundwork. And I am doing profit is a choice. I'm doing, of course, the years we've worked together certainly were game changers for me, and it really helped me a lot. And we set the groundwork to get me going in that aspect.
I remember teaching pricing without emotion in your workroom.
Yes,
that was awesome.
Yes, you did. I took it twice. I took it one time. Few years earlier, when right before you got sick, right before. And then the one we had it at the studio, and really, truly, it really changed my outlook, my aspect, we were well worth what we were asking, what we were charging, actually more than what we were charging probably. But it was really definitely a game changer. And then profit first. In coaching with you, we set that up several years ago, and that has been very beneficial for me. I set up my accounts. I put money in every month. Is it to the T? Probably not, but it's
better than it would be if you didn't do it.
Oh gosh, absolutely. I pay myself. I have a tax account. I have I have an owner's pay and a tax account, and then I pay myself. Since I'm an LLC and an S corp, I actually take a salary. I take a paycheck every 2 weeks. Those are the things that I've been very proud to be able to continue to do. So.
How do you think that positioned your company to weather this last year of the ups and downs that were brought to us via the pandemic?
I felt better knowing that I had some funds, and I won't say I had at this point in time, 6 months of funds there, sure. But I certainly had some buffer, and I didn't panic completely. We all panicked a little bit. We did not know what the road was going to hold and how things were going to play out. Certainly didn't know we'd be busy, but I didn't feel quite so stressed and scared.
One bad month was going to shut the doors. I think has been the beautiful thing about Profit First is it gives you, I think you called it a buffer. So while it may not have been 3, 6, 9 months, it's enough that you knew that one bad month wasn't going to crush your business.
Yes. It was very reassuring that, we didn't know what was going to happen, definitely, but it was reassuring not to feel like, okay, if I have to shut down for this month, I can still make my payroll, still have a little bit of, we're okay.
So now that we're in 2021 and entering a whole new year, right where we are, what are some of the big goals that you have ahead, knowing all the lessons learned, everything you've been through? What do you have for goals for your company for this new year?
I think my goals really, I'm trying to pivot away from the retail aspect of it and move into more of the wholesale to the trade, to be an asset to the designers in the area, to help them. The window treatment aspect is there's a lot of little details that can trip you up sometimes if it's not something you do on a regular basis. And most of the designers I know have so many things on their plate. I mean, I don't know how they handle everything that they have to handle. I have a very small part of that, but I like being an expert in that part. I like knowing that I can help them and hopefully make it as seamless for them as possible and be a good resource.
Yeah.
And I'd like to continue to grow that aspect, some quick little videos and some method share type of information on social media, developed a workroom product that I'm trying to expand some.
Tell us about the workroom product that you've created.
I created a couple of years ago. I was in such search for what I needed was a very large acrylic ruler. Couldn't find one. I wanted something 8 inches by 60 inches. I wanted it to be able to put in a hem with it. I just had so many different things I wanted to do with it. And I found somebody who could make it for me, essentially. Had a couple made for myself and used them for about 4 years, and then started having people see it and they were interested in it. I was like, okay, well, let me just see if I can get it out to market. And I've been very pleased with the interest that I've had in it. It makes me feel good that somebody else would enjoy using it like we do, because we use it all the time. But
I can absolutely see that, having made quilts and using acrylic rulers back and forth and things like that. Mm-hmm. And then being able to have one that is wide enough, 8 inches for him, yet also,
Mm-hmm.
that type of length where you can go down like a whole width of a panel or something. I mean, that could be a
Yep.
huge game changer. So I love that. You have some other cool things in your workroom that just might show up one day. I hope. I love the way that you hang your panels, and
Oh yeah.
you just
Oh
have
yeah.
all kinds of other little ingenious things around your workroom. And I think that's what's so interesting, Julia, is you made the acrylic ruler for you because you needed
Right.
it. And then other
Right.
people see it, and I think sometimes we underestimate how we solve the problem for us and other people see it. I've talked to software developers who were like, we solved the problem for us,
Right.
and then everybody else saw it. And it's true.
Right.
We solved the sewing problem for our own home, and somebody else saw it and wanted us to do it. Right. That's how things get started. So
Exactly.
yeah. Well, let's make
Exactly.
sure that we add a link into my show notes for your workroom
Oh, okay.
acrylic
Sure.
ruler, because I would love to make that, available for everybody to find easily. So do you
Well,
have
thank you. Thank you.
any thoughts about creating any new workroom products? Did
Um,
you enjoy the process?
I did enjoy the process. It is a lot of research, a lot of work on different things. The way I would use something just personally in my workroom, the basics may be the same, but you have to do things different, or you have to in manufacturing and finding vendors and things like that. But at this point, I don't have anything else coming down the pipe. I may make some different sizes in those rulers. I don't know yet, but yeah, I did have enjoyed the process. I have.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what are your, outside of getting rid of the retail or reducing it greatly and just maintaining profitability, do you have any other big goals for this year?
I'd really, as I mentioned before, I'd really like to have another person that's working in sewing so that I can concentrate on working on processes in my business. That doesn't sound like a profitability goal. Actually, it is, because if you're not don't have good processes, your profitability goes down the drain. So I'm working on processes, ways to streamline how we do things, get a better handle on workflow, organization, that type of thing. That's not necessarily a monetary goal as far as growing. I really definitely need to work on some of those aspects.
They are going to result in a financial uptick if they're done well. So you may not say, I'm going to grow my business by, $200,000, but you can easily say, I hope to have an X% reduction in this or an increase in this by percentage. But all of the things that you mentioned are definitely the way I think about profitability. These are the items that are going to be closer to where you want to go and what you want to do. So I think those are awesome. So Julia, where on social media are you hanging out where people can find you?
My website is www.jshdesigns.com. That is my website. It also has the ruler is on the website. You can purchase directly from the website. And then my Instagram is at JSH Designs Raleigh. So my daughter actually handles my Instagram account, and she's done a great job with it. And
that's great.
So, I am on Facebook.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast. It is encouraging to me to hear your journey and to hear the different things that you've gone through, moving all the way from your attic to the sunroom to a space, from working alone to hiring, to changing up your business model, to implementing good policies and procedures and even money management systems like pricing without emotion and profit first. Weathering COVID. I mean, look how far you've come. Look how much you've done. You have a lot to be really, really proud of. And I'm certain that this new year of 2021 is going to be amazing for you and your team. Now we just focus on hiring those right people and finding them out there. And I'm excited to keep watching you grow.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your encouragement and your help and your guidance over the years. I couldn't have done it without you.
Oh, you're sweet. Well, you have a great year, and thank you for sharing your time with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so thankful for Julia for joining us today. Growth can take time, and smart growth can be a continuous string of small steps that add up. If you want to know what your next step might be or how to take it, reach out and let's chat to see if my coaching can assist you. You can find out more by going to scarletthreadconsulting.com and signing up for a discovery call. Let me help you be profitable in your next step, because profit doesn't happen by accident.